Hey everyone, welcome to Founder Jam number 25. We are at a quarter of a century of Founder Jams already. This year is flying by. I know we had a past couple of weeks we had off, and today we got a special guest for you all, Brian Adams from Excelsior Capital. He'll be on in just a few minutes, and we're going to bring Joe on here in a second as well. We made an announcement last time on the last show that we had about some new branding efforts. We're working on that. And looks like in the next couple of weeks, we will have that out. We'll have the new website up and everything else that you need to find out. All the information about the schedule, the guests, the different activities that we're going to be doing at Founder Jam. And we are just excited to move kind of into that second phase. You've heard us tell the story before about how it's kind of something to practice, something to have a little fun with. And it kind of morphed into a more broader group of entrepreneurs across the world kind of getting together and learning from each other. And so that's what we want to do here. We want to ask the tough questions, have a little bit of fun, and also learn something so that we can take it back to our own businesses. And the more people that know about it, the better. So if you got a business owner, founder, entrepreneurial type of person that you know that needs to learn a little bit more about running their business, nothing says effort more than showing up and helping out other people. And so Founder Jam is definitely all about that. And speaking of helping other people and teaming up to do stuff, my man Joe Nolan in the house. Joe, what is up, brother? How are you?
Mr. D. Pasquale, it's great to see you again, man. Having a great week here back in Florida. Excited for another episode.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm as you notice, we're working on the technology here. I finally got the display set up.
Wow.
So we're working pretty hard here in the lab. So how was your trip, man? I know you were out of town for a bit.
It was fantastic. You know, surrounded by great people for a week in Las Vegas. I mean, if that doesn't get me some more Instagram followers, nothing will. But it was great. We saw, I saw Diplo, I saw Chainsmokers, for everyone into music out there. What's interesting, if you're not into music, to be honest, they're two of the just top grossing DJs in the world, or in the last decade even. So it's kind of cool to be around environments like that where, you're seeing people perform at that level. But it was a great time. Got some business in too as well. Got a bunch of business done out there, and really excited to be back, man. I'm doing work on my lab as well. You're beating me, as you can see behind me. The art's down. The new art has been ordered. It's gonna look super cool. That art's gonna have a new home somewhere else. And you're ahead of me, man. It looks great. I'm excited to get back on track here with Founder Jam, take it to the next level.
So I know we're here to talk about business, but we got to talk a little bit about Diplo. So what was the show like, man? I mean, what was going on there?
It was a good time. He was really good. I have to look the gentleman up before him was fantastic. I don't know that I guess the lead's name. But no, it was a great show. It was at Wynn, at XS. I hadn't been there in a long time, about 4 years. That's why my voice sounds like this, in addition to the several technology upgrades we're working with this week on the new Founder Jam 2.0. But it's not the new fancy microphone. It's trying to yell for 5 hours at the nightclub. It was pretty amazing. It's a great show. It's Vegas, the lights, the pyrotechnics, the smoke machines and everything. It's the service, the team there. They do a great job. So man, it was a wild time. It felt good to let loose a little bit. It's been a while.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. Well, so believe it or not, and we will get to the show, but believe it or not, I just booked, my family and I, we just booked our flights to Vegas actually for the holidays. And
no way. That's beautiful, man. It's a great time to be there.
Easiest way to get there, and then we want to see the Grand Canyon. So anyway, that's going to be a cool opportunity.
I've been out there during that time, and it's great. 75, no humidity, sunshine. For sightseeing, is probably, or hiking. If you're into outdoor activities, maybe the water stuff might be a little cold, like around Havasu or something. But anything outdoors, that's the perfect time of year. Cycling, I know cycling gets pretty big out there in the winter. So, man, good for you. It's going to be fun.
Cool. Well, I told everyone that we got a special guest today, Brian Adams from Excelsior Capital. He's an
All right.
expert in real estate investments, worked with numerous family offices over the years, has much experience working in that space. And I wanted to talk to him a little bit about starting a business. We'll probably touch on the real estate a little bit too, but I really want to know what it's like starting a business, especially in that industry. It touches a little bit on with my industry as well. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Brian here from Excelsior.
See where he's at.
Brian, are you there? Can you hear me, man?
Hey. All right.
Hey guys, what's going on?
How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So for those of you who don't know, I know Brian through LinkedIn. We hooked up. He's been on my podcast. Been on his The Colloquium podcast. Check it out. Check Brian out.
We had dinner in person, a rarity these days.
Yes, at Tropical Acres. Tropical Acres Steakhouse in Fort Lauderdale. So cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We like to be super conversational. We have a couple questions that we definitely want to ask you, but we also want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do and hopefully drop some knowledge for everyone out there. So maybe tell us a little bit about Excelsior to get started, and definitely plug your podcast, The Colloquium, as well.
Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So as background, I'm a New Yorker who married a Nashville native. Moved to Nashville about 15 years ago. My wife's family has a single family office based here in Tennessee. And so I practiced law for a few years, but got into the investment side of it through the family, working with different GPs and sponsors, et cetera. Became enamored with real estate as a business and as an asset class. I started my company 11 years ago now with my partner. And we can get into the nitty gritty, but it was initially started in order to help our family source quality deal flow and do direct co-investments. It then expanded to friends and family, and then now we have a great network of investors. And we essentially do three things. We provide people, individuals and families, with access to direct co-investment opportunities. We solve for a double-digit cash-on-cash yield annualized that we send out in monthly distributions. And we only work with taxable investors. So we do everything we can to really accentuate all the benefits that come from direct real estate ownership through cost segregation analysis and accelerated depreciation.
Awesome. I know you guys are deep in that. I know if anyone's got questions about that sort of stuff, Brian is definitely the person too. And I know if you don't know the answer, you're so well connected that you got plenty of people in the space to help you out. So you mentioned you're from New York. So I was actually born in New York. Joe's a Jersey guy. So we were just talking about Vegas, never been there. Now I want to know what Nashville's like. That's another place I've never been.
So I'm from upstate New York. My folks are from Jersey. My business partner's from Long Island. So very much kind of tri-state representation. And Excelsior Capital, Excelsior is the state motto of New York. So we named the company after our roots. Being in Nashville, if you had asked me, obviously back in 2000 when I graduated high school, do you think you're going to live in Tennessee, or even really in college, I would have never thought of it as even an option. But when I started dating my wife, we started spending time here. We were living in the Northeast. This would be kind of in the 2005, 2010 range. I frankly got just kind of burned out on the Northeast scene. It seemed like, the taxes were getting worse. The business environment was getting worse. I think 9/11 in some ways changed the mindset for a lot of financial services firms and entrepreneurs that maybe they didn't necessarily need to be in the city in order to start something really cool. And the tech scene obviously was burgeoning across the country. And I was the one who started agitating towards moving to Nashville. I thought it was going to be a great quality of life, a really good cost of living, no state income tax, and the weather was much better than in New York or Boston, where I was spending time. And so we moved here in 2010, and the timing was incredible because that was really when it started to develop, and the growth that's experienced over the last 10, 15 years is frankly beyond anything that I can explain. But
Cool.
it's a great place to live. I've got little kids, great place to raise a family, and incredible place to start a company as well.
Awesome. I gotta check it out at some point too. Now, Joe, I don't know if you want to comment on the tax situation in the Northeast, but
Yeah, my comment's simple: too high. That's it. Without it's very high. I mean, Brian, man, it's great to have you on the show. I love Nashville. I've never lived there. I visited a bunch. My best friend who Bobby's met is a professor over there at Vanderbilt. Maybe we do have a lot of listeners on the coasts, from our personal networks, California and New York area. Can you maybe describe just a little bit like the energy that's in Nashville? When I visited there right before COVID in February, there's so many buildings going up and Amazon moving in and other tech companies, housing going up. Maybe just talk a little bit about what the, for lack of a better word, the vibe is right there for, as someone who's there now. And a lot of people have heard about Florida, Texas, Austin. Maybe just comment on that, because to me it's very motivational and very forward thinking. The just the energy going on in Nashville right now. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you hate to fall into cliches, but they are useful, and I actually really think that Nashville is positioning itself to be the Silicon Valley of the South.
Wow.
And initially, the story of Nashville, it's interesting because the branding, right? The Chamber of Commerce, they paint this picture of Music City, and that really does draw a lot of tourists in. And we do have a fair amount of music industry people here, but on a per GDP basis, I think it's like less than 10% of our local GDP.
Wow.
So it's done a
that's
great job.
something no one realizes that, right? We think it's just all music or entertainment, Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we're still dwarfed by New York and LA, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. We do have a lot of folks who call Tennessee their primary residence, who are in the recording or entertainment business for tax purposes. But when it comes to actually making money, it's great branding and it's good window dressing, but it actually doesn't pay the bills. But what they did a really good job of is telling that story, right, and getting excitement. And now we are the #1 destination for bachelor and bachelorette parties in America. We just overtook Vegas on both ends.
Really?
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, tourism is a huge part of the story. The kind of growth of country music as a global music genre, I think, has helped. But the reality is, it's all about healthcare. I mean, Hospital Corporation of America, HCA, the largest private healthcare company in the world, was started here in the 70s, and because of HCA, we now have all of these healthcare related companies on the provider side, on the tech side here. So I think it's something like 70% plus of our GDP is healthcare oriented. And really, if you want to be in that business, you need to have a presence here. What's been really interesting is the local leaders have seen this story play out with, say, financial services in New York or tech in Silicon Valley, and they really wanted to be diversified. And so they've made a really big effort over the last 5 or 10 years to have more financial services represented, more tech represented. So now we have AllianceBernstein has relocated the majority of their offices here. Oracle announced a big office here, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera. And I think there's two sides of the story, right? There's the corporations are looking to get out of tax burdensome places that are hard to do business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the employer side. But I think even more interestingly is, and this is kind of dovetails with our investment thesis, this maturing millennial generation, right? People who are in their late 30s, early 40s. I think the narrative for a long time on Wall Street was that they were never going to have children. They were never going to get married. They were going to live in Brooklyn and eat avocado toast and wear skinny jeans their whole lives. The reality is,
skinny jeans, skinny jeans, man. Yeah.
It happens, man. So I think, because of 2008 and the Great Recession, that natural generational phase got pushed back 3 to 5 years because they just simply couldn't afford it. And they had to go to places like New York or San Francisco because that's where the jobs were. But as they got their feet underneath them, as their credit got better, as they gained wealth, they wanted to start getting married and having kids like every generation before them. And that increasingly meant that they were making decisions about where they wanted to live, work, and play based on cost of living, quality of life, access to single family homes, and access to education for their kids. And, you know, I think a lot of us in our 20s, we rebel against the way that we were raised, right? So we never want to live in the suburbs. We never want to drive an SUV. But then you realize, but you start having kids and you say, well, I want them to have green space. I want them to have access to great education. And you start looking at markets that fit the bill there. And when you look at those type of markets in states that don't have an income tax, I mean, I think it's really logical that places like Austin, Nashville, and most of Southern Florida have continued to prosper right now.
Yeah. I think you're right about the generation, right? There's assumptions were made, but people, you grow up, if that's the right term, you grow up really fast once the family starts building and you settle down, right? I mean, I think we've learned that lesson, right, Joe? I mean,
I'm trying to. I'm in progress.
Well, actually, that's a really good point. You should take note about the bachelor parties.
Apparently, I'm going to the wrong destination. I need to be in Nashville more.
And don't get me wrong, like I think New York's the greatest city in the world, and there's always going to be huge energy there, and it's going to be terrific. But you can't look at me with a straight face and say that they're happy with the decision of not having Amazon do HQ2 there, given everything that's going on with COVID, given the financial services flight to Florida. I mean, New York's gonna have to reinvent itself, right? Because financial services is being disintermediated before our very eyes with crypto and DeFi and all these things.
Yeah.
So I think Nashville's done a good job positioning itself to continue to grow. But you know, we'll see. I can't imagine it's going to be able to maintain this type of energy and pace, but I've been wrong the last 10 years. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's transition into some questions about business. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit about starting a business. Joe, I know you had a couple of questions you wanted to ask. So if you want to shoot those out, I'll put them on the screen.
Yeah, go for it. We'll tweet them out.
Okay.
Yep. Good to go.
So the first thing, Brian, we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. The first question is very, very simple, but is it on the screen yet? What's going on?
There we go.
There we go. What was the catalyst? Like, why did you start your business? I know a little bit about the story, but maybe you can tell me exactly why you decided to start Excelsior.
Yeah. So I guess a couple things. One, I was practicing law, and I was working at the district attorney's office, which is a great job, but didn't pay very well. And we were about to have our first child. So I really wanted to move into corporate law, right? Kind of a more stable, traditional white shoe law firm. There's probably 5 or 6 of them in Nashville. And I started having coffee with some of these partners and realized pretty quickly that they were all fairly miserable. They worked a ton. Their home lives were not great. They had a golden handcuffs issue where they were making just enough to maintain the quality of life expected of them, but never enough to play offense or be entrepreneurial or take a break from the grind. And what the moment I remember most was this really well-established partner in Nashville said that when he looked back on his career, he realized that the value that he created for the enterprise of the firm was directly correlated to how much time he didn't spend with his friends and family.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought that wasn't a business model that I wanted to be a participant in. And so that was kind of happening. And then I had the opportunity to take an abridged version of a Vanderbilt Business School class called Launching the Venture with Michael Burcham. And at the first meeting or the first session of the course, he said, I want you to all go to the Fortune 400, look at the list. And if you remove everybody who is on that list because they inherited the money or they married the money, everybody else falls into 3 buckets. 1, they worked at a big corporation and they got stock options or equity and kind of grinded it out over time. 2 is they had the great idea in their garage and they monetized that idea. And 3 is some form of real assets, right? real estate, commodities, oil and gas, timber, etc. And I thought, man, that's like the smartest thing I ever heard in my life. And I don't really want to work in a big corporation. I don't have a great idea. So let's try real estate. And here we are.
Damn. So
Wow.
that's how it got rolling. And when you talk about running your business, what are some lessons that you learned when you first started it? Some stuff that, and maybe not specific to your industry, or if that's all you got, but something that we can teach newer founders to be aware of.
We probably don't have enough time to go over all the mistakes I've made. We have to do like multiple episodes for this.
That's why we have 25 founder jams, because Joe and I have been sitting up mistakes for 6 months.
Yeah, and I think that's the right question, right? Because the mistakes are much more powerful than what to do right. I mean, I think a lot of us inherently have a good sense of what we should be doing, but what not to do, I think, is helpful in terms of don't step in this pothole. You can save yourself a lot of time and energy. I think the biggest challenge that I faced was somewhat related to real estate specifically, but I think is germane to anybody who's starting a company, is whatever your product is, whatever your toaster oven is that you're selling, your widget, that's really important, right? Like that widget has to work. There needs to be a market for it. It needs to be a good product, it needs to be a good service and offering, and you need to be focused on that. But you're essentially going into being a small business owner. And all of these things that don't directly relate to that widget, human relations, sales, marketing, tax, audit, whatever, that infrastructure has to be in place for your company to be successful. And I think the trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into is, if I just become a deal person, if I'm able to transact a lot, or if I can sell a lot, the company's going to do really well. But unless you can scale efficiently, you're never going to have a real business. And I don't care if you're a real estate person or a trader or whatever you're doing, like the reality is small businesses in America fail, right? So you've got to be wary of falling into the trap of just being a deal person, would be in real estate, someone that just goes out and transacts, because it's not actual business in and of itself. And a big mistake I made early on in my career was just acquiring assets, because we were finding good opportunities. We had learned how to sell and raise capital, but we didn't put enough time or resources into investor relations, communications, marketing, all these other things that just didn't enable us to grow. And I spent probably a year of my life getting my teeth kicked in by investors, not because the portfolio wasn't performing, but because my marketing was dog shit and my reporting was terrible and the investor relations experience was really poor. And I realized that I had to take everything down to the studs and rebuild it. So I think that's just a big one, is understanding that, you know, there's a lot more to it than just whatever product or service or offering you have. And it's hard. I mean, there's a reason small businesses in America fail. You know, there's a reason family offices, that adage of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. I think part of it is the interpersonal issues, but a large part of it is a family office is really just a small business. And there just aren't a lot of small businesses that stick around for more than 2 or 3 generations. It's hard.
It sounds like in the beginning you were a great real estate person, a great salesperson for deals, but some of the just natural, or not, excuse me, unnatural business activities were what maybe you needed some work on. And I don't know about you, Joe. Joe's in digital marketing. What you said, Brian, is absolutely basically a mirror image of what I'm going through right now with
Bullseye.
Business Initiate Impact. I mean, we were very, very good at the financial management side of things and some of the family governance stuff, but we are learning as we go how to put together the business practices, and hopefully we'll be able to scale someday. So how about you, Joe?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we spoke about that, I think, on one of the earlier episodes. Like, we're very good at our domain expertise, you know, you and I, but but the other things, right? I mean, I've been very open about, we're on our third financial team from accounting, investments, and bookkeeping. So that combination of all three, and we're 3 years old. The first year wasn't pleasant. Second year they didn't get it done. Brian, but to your point, that's so much time and energy and lack of focus on growing the business, satisfying existing clients, trying to get new clients. And I think you're right. I mean, I think I was probably a victim of that in year one. I mean, we were very small in year one. We started from scratch, but, saying, oh, I could do this myself, or that's easy enough. I could learn how to do that. But the reality is there's so much more to it, especially for me on everything on the finance side, which is not my domain expertise. So making that, realizing that, I think for entrepreneurs is hard, because maybe, not that there's a bit of ego, but there's more of maybe just trying to get it done quickly, or cost savings, an ego maybe. That kind of combination of all three, I think, can really hurt businesses. And it's not just in 1 year. I mean, it can be like any year. I think entrepreneurs can fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, but I think the important takeaway that I've learned over the last 10 plus years, and by networking with a lot of other entrepreneurs and business owners, and being part of affinity networks. I'm a huge fan of these affinity networks. I think they're really powerful, like YPO and some of these family office groups. The problems are all pretty much the same.
That's right. Yeah.
No matter what you do or what industry you're in, everyone's dealing with work-life balance, and everyone's dealing with how to scale efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And like Joey, you were saying, just because you can do those tasks, is it really the highest and best use of enterprise?
Well, that's a much more eloquent and simplified way to put it. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. And my fault was I actually couldn't do it, so that was part of the problem. But wow, I think that's a really strong takeaway. If you can, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's huge. It's very insightful. Yeah.
I once heard someone say that you have to stop shooting on yourself, and it was funny, but it's really truthful. So okay, so we're kind of on a little bit of a downer here. A question for you, brother. The next question, you can probably skip the first half of this one, Brian. But
right.
Question number two is, what's the most challenging part about running your business? I think we've touched on that a little bit, but what brings you the most joy? What's invigorating about running a real estate business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the coolest part about the company, and people say, I'm going to go dark and then we're going to go light. So when I talk to other, in my world, they're called sponsors or general partners, or people out there doing deals. And I see them say like, oh, I really want to do $100 million worth of acquisitions this year, or whatever square footage or whatever metric they put out there. And I'm really cautious against that, because early in my career, I'd set certain numbers that I wanted, be it net worth, square footage, AUM. Like, I think some of the saddest, darkest moments you'll have as an entrepreneur is when you hit those numbers, because you realize that nothing has fundamentally changed. Mm-hmm. And like, there's no end to it, right? The rabbit hole just goes deeper. I mean, there's intricacies upon intricacies upon intricacies. And you've got to be cool with that journey that you're going on, because there's no end game. Mm-hmm. And what I always tell them is, what gives me the greatest joy is knowing that I'm employing 16 people, teaching them skill sets that they can port to wherever they want to go. And if at the end of the day, my employees come to me and they say, hey, like, I'm going to go do my own thing, I learned a lot from you. And if each of them goes on to employ 15 or 16 people, and I could have provided, a quality of life to 50 families or whatever the number is, like, that's a legacy I'm totally cool with.
Awesome, man. That's cool. That's a great mission. And talking about serving not only the people that you serve in your business, but also the people that you work with and hire and employ. That's super powerful stuff. Now, you alluded to this. You alluded to our next question, and we got just two more here.
We didn't share the questions in advance, so this is
this is a good one, though. You kind of alluded to it, though. Okay, so question number 3 was, you hit your goals. What do you actually do to celebrate?
Yeah.
And
So
you said there's no end game though.
no, it's important to have goals, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
say that they're meaningless, but goals have the power that you impart to them, right?
Mhm.
If you put all of your psychological self-worth into what's in your bank account or how many employees you have or whatever your business goalpost is,
Mm-hmm.
if you hit them or you don't hit them, it's going to have an outsized impact on how you view your self-worth, right?
Yep.
And so we do celebrate whatever, when we close a property, we have dinner, we do events, we do group things within the company itself. But I really don't focus a lot on kind of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly goals with my employees. Well, obviously we have them within myself and my partner, things that we aspire to do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really about how can we create systems and processes, document those systems and processes that then allow us to scale in a more efficient manner. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more worried about systems and processes than I am about specific acquisitions or specific near-term goals. That's much more interesting and compelling to me than it would be to say, we hope we close 5 deals this year or whatever it is.
You kind of think like I do, right? It's almost more celebrating is almost more planning the next stage, right? Because you're excited about being successful and working with people. Joe, on the other hand, I think you'd probably go back to Vegas.
Depends on the client. Depends on the size of the client. But Brian, this comes out of some of my experience where we had leadership that wasn't into celebrating wins, wasn't into recognition, and it was just, this is what you're supposed to do, and if you do it, great, and if you don't do it, okay, we'll figure out why, and kind of go through the standard business practice of reviewing and auditing and stuff like that. And it was this very neutral to mediocre environment that everyone for 2 years complained about, regardless of their personality type, whether they were an analyst or a creative or a media buyer or a coder, right? 4 totally different personality types, but no one enjoyed it, right? There was no sense of satisfaction or accomplishment, like this human factor to it. So that's kind of where this question comes out of, because there's many leaders, there are people instructing others to be this way and kind of take emotion. I hate to say take emotion out of business, but it's to take, I think, that positive energy or that sense of achievement and almost self-worth of what you're doing every day. Back to your point around the correlation of time with your family versus time at work and the contribution there. So it's good to hear at least 2 of us here go out for some steak dinners, some fancy dinners. We'll have to get Bobby on board. Yeah, I brought Bobby out too. Bobby and I had dinner, so Bobby came to one of our dinners here in Fort Lauderdale.
I had a celebratory piece of salmon once because of
you
you.
did, yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Brian, man, I appreciate just a little bit of knowledge that you have that you've kind of dropped on us here. I wanted you to mention your podcast for sure, and if there's any final words of wisdom that you got for a young entrepreneur trying to start a business, or maybe someone who works, you mentioned this, actually, I want to bring this up. You mentioned about the people working for you and encouraging them maybe at some point to step out on their own. What would you say, maybe the thought is what you would say to someone who is kind of working in an employee role that maybe has an opportunity that they can chase. So anyway, tell us about your podcast and some last words would be great.
Yeah. Thank you all for having me. It's a lot of fun. Bob, it's been fun to get to know you over the last year, I guess.
Yep.
Podcast is Colloquium. Check it out. We interview entrepreneurs, family office, and high net worth professionals and service providers and members within that community. So we'd love to get some more folks to learn about it. If you're interested, connect me on LinkedIn. I'm super active. Brian Adams, Excelsior Capital. You can go to the website, excelsiorcapitalgp.com. In terms of your question, when I onboard a new employee, or I was pitching somebody to join our company earlier this week, I tell them that within 2 to 3 years, if you don't come to me asking for an outrageously large raise, or that you're going to leave to start your own thing, I have failed you as a leader, as an employer. Like, that is the goal here, right? It's totally open book. You should devour everything you can, learn as much as you can, be so critical to the company that you think you can come to me and ask for like ownership percentage or a huge raise or both, to an extent that I say, listen, I can't afford to keep you any longer. You should go do your own thing. Let me help you start your company. I think that's the goal of a good leader. What I would tell entrepreneurs, and this is something I really struggle with to this day, if you're successful, there'll be a lot of moments where you compare yourself to other successful people. And it's really hard to reflect on the success that you've had when all you're doing is looking at what Bill, Bob, or Joan have done. But, and I had somebody tell me this, if you can take that space from where you think your life should be to what your reality is, if you can decrease that gap and become comfortable with who you are and where you are, it will decrease the suffering you experience every day.
Wow.
I'm not saying you shouldn't aspire to great things, but you should really, really comfortable with who you are and where you are at any given moment.
Awesome. Cool, man. Brian, man, that's some great knowledge. Appreciate it. Joe, any final words for Brian?
No, thanks. Look, thanks for being on. I want to encourage all of our listeners and everyone who sees the cut-ups of this. So Brian, we have our editors now. We'll chop this up. We'll get you all the clips. We share them on all of our LinkedIn and our social profiles. Encourage everyone, visit the website. Give Brian a shout out on LinkedIn. Definitely follow him there. We've been following each other, I think, for a couple of weeks now. So there's tons of great content. I'm learning a lot from the content you're sharing. So I know everyone always says follow someone, but this is an area that I have virtually no knowledge of. And the content you're sharing has been very insightful, easy to digest for someone not in that space as well. So I know that takes effort to do that every day. So thank you for that. And thanks for joining us today. This was great. You shared some great knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me.
I'll see you in Nashville, man, at some of these parties. It sounds like I have to no more Vegas. We'll head over to Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to host you, and I would recommend you take like the Friday evening flight into Nashville and the Sunday afternoon flight out. You make a lot of new friends.
Oh, good idea. Good idea. Excellent. Maybe this is a new business we discovered now.
All right, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great one, man. See ya.
All right. Take care.
Man, that was cool,
Wow.
man. It's good to connect with someone who's got some knowledge about stuff that you're just not an expert in, right? I mean.
Oh yeah. I mean, but you could see, to his point, he made a fantastic point about the problems and the challenges, even some of the opportunities that we all face are quite similar.
Yeah.
And the knowledge he was sharing is relevant to all of us, right? The restaurant down the block, financial services, marketing, very, very relevant to all of us. So that was fantastic, and hope that gives some people some confidence again that they're not going through this stuff alone, because it's hard. We know that, we talk about it. It's a grind.
Well, what's interesting that you said is that he almost gave a recap of 5 or 10 of the founder jams that we want, right? I mean, he said, listen, these are the things that you got to think about. You might be an expert restaurateur or an expert Facebook, I mean, Joe, you are a licensed, bona fide, recognized Facebook ad specialist, right? But if you don't know how to run a business, it doesn't matter how many you've bought. How many hundreds of millions of dollars of Facebook ads? Tell me again.
Yeah, my team and I, 500 million now. 500 million. Our team.
$500 million you spent on Facebook. Listen, I don't even spend that. Gosh, I haven't spent that much.
I wish I was that good at bookkeeping, but that's the point, right? We have to find people who are that good at accounting and finance.
Yeah. So here's the deal, though. So another thing that I learned from Brian, it's really, I wanted to share my screen. Now I've shared my screen before on the show, and it's always a little bit funny. But so this is another thing that I was just learning from Brian. I am going to have to invest in, where'd it go here? In these next time I go to Nashville. I need some.
Let's see it.
I need some skinny jeans.
Skinny jeans.
Can you see? There they are.
You have great quads. You have great quads, man. You would rock those. You would be some attention getters strolling down what is it in Nashville? I forget the name of it in Nashville, but yeah, you draw some attention, man.
Right,
for sure.
Now, we have gone over this. I think I've mentioned before on the show that I play the drums.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mentioned this, but what I don't think we have mentioned before is that you have some singing experience. So maybe we put maybe we get the band back together, even though we never had a band.
That's funny. I have this. I mean, I think I might even have those pair of skinny jeans somewhere. So yeah, no, we can, and in that color too, in gray.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
man. That would look good. I don't know. So maybe when the Founder Jam merch comes out, we drop some skinny jeans line. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll figure it out. If the fans want it, we'll deliver.
This has been a killer. This has been a killer episode, man. So I think we got some cool stuff coming down the pike. Any announcements you want to make before we sign it off?
No, I just say, the last session we had, we promised kind of a new vision of Founder Jam. We've taken some time. We've rallied the resources. It's in progress, near final. For all of you using those fancy project management systems, we are in the near final phase, which is great. You've seen a bunch of upgrades we have here, right? We're redoing both of our offices, some different graphics on screen, better audio. I don't think we've had any real video problems today for the first time, Bobby. For the first time, there's been no video on your side.
With my display.
Look at what's. I mean, this is the real deal, man. This is the real deal, which is awesome.
Like Joe Gardy used to say, man, we are carrying the banner.
We are carrying the banner. That's right. Yeah. So I probably sound like I'm not 5 units down the hall for the first time, which is great. But work in progress here. I'm gonna have some cool stuff. Be a little bit of a surprise, and maybe next week, right? Founder Jam from Austin could be.
That would be sweet.
Austin, guys, taking it on the road. We promised everyone some cool updates, and we might start taking the show on the road, which would be pretty cool. So yeah, man, those are the updates. Everything else it won't be tell us, it'll be show us here probably by the next show next week. We'll be rocking and rolling. We'll have a lot to share with everyone.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's Founder Jam 25. Joe, you have a great afternoon or rest of your day here.
Yes, sir.
You're out on the West Coast. I hope your lunch hour was awesome, and we will catch you next week from Austin.
Sounds good. Peace.